Mark. How
Hi,
are
Sarah.
you?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Very well, thank you.
Good. It is nice to meet you.
It is nice to meet you too. Virtually meet you. I've
Right.
only met so many people online these past 2 years. So, but it's
I'm
great. It's great to be connected.
it is. I really love the fact that we can do this. The technology that we have is kind of amazing,
It's
you know.
it's uh, it is so like I actually I like to incorporate technology a lot into my writing. So the fact that like everybody is really being kind of forced in that direction now, it's more of a universal feeling. Before, a lot of people were a little reluctant to, you know, be online, get connected online, and all this stuff. So now that this is kind of the new norm, it's nice to see that change
We're getting comfortable with our Zoom meetings and things like that,
for
you
sure.
know. Yeah, and for someone like me, I mean, most of my time I was an English teacher for a couple decades, teaching college freshman comp, and I loved teaching distance learning. And
Mhm.
we didn't have this kind of technology, but ever since then, I do a few podcasts among this one and other ones. And in the one podcast, Heavy Metal Horror, we're interviewing like rock stars. You know, these are big musicians, and some of them
Mhm.
live in Germany and in Sweden, and they're inviting us in their homes to spend time with them a couple hours
Yeah.
in a way that we would never have it. So for me, having this access to talk with people like you and meet with friends and play games on virtual game night because we can't
Mhm.
see each other in real person.
Yep. What
I
kind of
love it.
games are you playing?
We're doing a lot of the game bot, or let's see, what is it called? Jackbox party games.
Okay. Yep.
Are
Mhm.
you familiar with those?
Yes.
Yes, and we love the robot rap battle. There's one called
I love
the,
the drawful, I think is a part of it,
oh
or at
yes,
least
yes,
one of the older Jackbox versions. I just
yes,
love the drawing ones.
and there's one where I, I forget the name of it, where you are given a prompt and you have to come up with responses within the prompt, like the worst song that your the worst song you could have a stripper dance to is this or
Mhm.
something, and you come up with some horrible thing, or
Yep. That's kind of
um
that goes into like the Cards Against Humanity
yes,
uh viewpoint.
exactly, yes, which is there. I mean, that's so much fun. And so I'm grateful for this. I
Mhm.
love the technology. I just I I tutor from home. My wife works from home. I don't ever want to work in a place where I have to go to a building and
Mhm.
and see people. It's like, no, I'm pretty good like this. I'm
Yeah.
happy, you know?
I know I have definitely thrived in this environment. I was at home beforehand, and so now that it's like, well, now nobody expects me to go out, so that's
Yeah.
nice.
And it's okay. Everyone's like, oh, we get it.
Mhm.
No one's going to look twice at you for when you say, I
Yeah.
want to work from home, or let's have this Zoom meeting, and so it's kind of awesome. I've become such a homebody, and I won't say hermit, but I like being at home.
Mhm.
I prefer the creature comforts of home,
Yeah.
and if I can do everything from here, why shouldn't I just be
Mhm.
relaxed? You know?
Exactly. I think back to the days when I was, when I was kind of first giving writing as a career ago, and I had this mentality that's like, oh, I've got to go out and do writing because, people are writing in coffee shops, people are
Yes.
writing in parks, people are writing wherever. And while I do love writing outside, I love writing outside on my porch. I don't
Mhm.
need to go anywhere to, feel that inspiration. And I I just find that's like there's too much going on outside. Like if I'm in a coffee shop writing, it's like I'm
Yeah.
actually just people watching.
Yes.
So
Right. Yeah, I never understood that. I mean, I've seen it. It started when I was in grad school. This notion of people going to coffee shops and bringing paper or their laptops, and I was like, I don't get it because yeah, we're jumping ahead, but it's so far removed from my creative process.
yeah.
I can't just sit there and be in this noisy environment. I have noise, but it's like music. I have very specific things I like to listen to,
Mhm.
and then that helps me kind of get into my zone. But um, and then they have all those jokes like, well, people just want to be seen writing in those coffee
Mhm.
shops, and so it's like, well, I don't know about that. I don't know what they're really doing, but maybe it's their process. It just didn't
Yeah,
resonate with me.
it's amazing how many, like when I listen to people talk about their writing process, a lot of people are like, I have to listen to music.
Yeah.
And I've like been forced to have to listen to music at this point because during the pandemic, with both my partner and I working from home, like I didn't want to hear what he was talking about. So I just had to like noise canceling headphones and just having like a low hum that
Mm-hmm.
eventually like I started to warm up to like, okay, like I can get used to this. And now I've started to add like some Tibetan chanting into the
Mm-hmm.
mix and all of this stuff.
Sure.
But yeah, everybody, it's so different.
Yes. I don't like listening to songs that I know really well, as far as songs with words,
Mhm.
because I'm going to be distracted and want to sing it. Um, Soundtracks, movie soundtracks, were the what I listen to, and very specific ones.
Mhm.
Well, it depends on the writing situation. Like I've also written some movies, and so for my second movie, which was like a 70s exploitation flick, I was listening to a lot of 70s
Mhm.
music, funk and stuff like Black Sabbath and things like that that were very 1970s. But now I have the Alien soundtrack, the soundtrack to Ravenous, and then I have tons of like Mozart and Beethoven
Mhm.
um I have got a whole writing list like on my on my jukebox. And then I've got a lot of like Charlie Christian, which is a jazz guitarist. And then I also have a lot of Lionel Hampton, who's a vibraphone player from the 1930s.
Mhm.
And it's just so light and bouncy. And I love the vibraphone anyway. So it kind of, between that and a little bit of Vince Guaraldi, and it just kind of gets me in this nice, happy place.
Yeah.
So no, I totally get it. Um, that's kind of the reason why I started this show, is to
Mhm.
talk with other writers, very just relaxed like we're doing now, and just talking about our writing processes and learn what other people are doing, because all we know is what we do.
What we do, yeah.
Yeah, and I know a few other writers, but we haven't really, just other through just conversation, because they're friends of mine, we don't sit and chat writing
Yeah.
generally.
I think about when I don't have any what I would consider like my close group of friends, no one is a writer
Mhm.
and nobody really ever understands like what I'm doing and what I'm going through. So it's nice to have, your writing groups, your connections, and being able to just reach out because it's such a frustrating process that's also so rewarding. So it's like you want to complain about it a lot of the time, but you also want to celebrate moments of it. And it's hard for people who aren't writers to like comprehend, like, you complain about this so much. So why are you doing it? Like, why did
Right.
you like give up everything to do this? And it's hard. So I think having those groups that you can reach out to that know the experience is just so helpful, and especially like connecting and folks listening on podcasts. It's like, you could be just listening along and then all of a sudden you're like, oh wait, like that's something that I identify with, or that's something I do, or maybe I should try doing that. So it's a great tool and a great way for anyone to keep learning.
I agree. I agree. And meeting so many writers, I'm on Facebook groups with writers, but
Mhm.
there's not the interaction that I've noticed on Instagram. As I was real
Mhm.
hesitant to get on Instagram, and I've been on just, I don't know, not quite a year, maybe a year or so, year and a half. And I have met so many wonderful writers, and we've become friends. And I I love that there's a camaraderie
Mhm.
between the independently published, self-published, traditionally published. It doesn't matter,
Mhm.
just this support and encouragement
Yeah.
that we see so much of the negativity on social media, the people who are just there to bash. And you know I, I've always been a shameless promoter, and I have no problem with that. And I'm also very encouraging. It's like, look, if anyone, hey, you can write too. I'm not special.
Mhm.
I have a degree in creative writing, but I don't really see that as necessary to just telling a good story. So um, yeah, I just think it's a great place to encourage, and that's really what I wanted to kind of do, what I accomplish with the show in
Yeah.
that way too.
I
You
think
know,
it's funny what you mentioned about the difference between Facebook and Instagram, because when I think about like how they're structured, at least the writing groups that I'm a part of, you have somebody that's like kind of like on Facebook, at least it's a big load of text. And I don't know about you, but like I stare at my computer screen all day looking at text. And it's sometimes very hard to engage in that type of forum when you're not because you want to kind of take a break from seeing words. So
right.
going on to Instagram and seeing the visuals, seeing inside people's homes, seeing their pets, I feel like you just like there's such a more like authentic sense of community, even though everything's airbrushed, even though like
Sure.
everything's filtered. Yeah, I Instagram is always like my social media place
Yeah.
of choice. So I think that's and I've met so many great people through that process. And honestly, the reason why I have a literary agent is because of social media, because I was on there being like, woe is me. I've been querying 70 plus agents at this point. Is anyone ever going to like recognize that, oh, maybe this book has potential?
Yeah.
And having, someone tweet out at me that was like, hey, my agent's looking for this type of mystery, why don't you reach out? And it was game changing.
Yeah. That's wonderful. I definitely want to talk more about that.
Mhm.
I mean, we're talking now, and I'm recording the show, so this is all going to be part of it. But let me just do my intro, and then
Yes,
we'll continue the conversation.
for sure.
Hey, this is Mark Justice, and you are back with Between the Lines. And tonight's show is very special. I'm very excited to introduce Sarah E. Burr. Sarah writes not one, not two, three different cozy mystery series or mystery series, which I'm really looking forward to talking about. And I just want to welcome you, Sarah. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me, Mark. It's always when I am introduced as a writer, it is such like still a pinch me moment, because it's a hard road, and to have just anybody recognize that it's such an honor. So thank you.
My pleasure. I'm really impressed with when I when I first came across you on Instagram and I saw your posts, and then I started looking at, went to your website. I'm like, wow, all these different series, and all of them are so different.
They are so
Yeah, and
different.
that was exciting to me, um, you know, because I also write in different genres,
Mhm.
across the platforms, and that was intentional, and so I want to definitely talk about that, because my first book is a cozy mystery. It was nothing I ever intended to write. Start off as a
Mhm.
movie. Long story short, became a cozy mystery, and I had to like actually read what the genre was, the parameters, because I was a horror sci-fi comedy writer, and
Yep.
so like I don't know what this is.
And you
I'm like,
have to be really like people who are in their line of, subgenre. It's like you can't, sometimes you can't take a step out without causing controversy. So,
yeah,
um,
audience expectations. It's like the movie
yeah,
Misery,
it's
right? And Kathy Bates shows up, and you didn't have the murder right, Mr. Man. I'm just waiting for that. Yeah. Um, well, then I see. I did break away from genre expectation, because my mystery, there's no murder. There's a mystery, but there's no blood, no gore.
Mhm.
And it's a very Hallmark, Christmas, very friendly, which I found incredibly kind of delightful to write in. In
They're
all
so
honesty.
calming. And like the thing that I love most about the cozy mystery genre, which is actually, I came to that later in my like exploration of the mystery verse. But the thing I love about cozies is just that the people in them are they're so set on doing what's right and creating a world where it's safe, everyone is welcome. It's just this warm blanket that you're wrapping around yourself, and as you're writing it, it's like you're just like reveling in this lovely world where it's like, bad people get what's coming to them. Bad things don't really happen outside of that, and it's just a nice place to escape to.
Hmm. The formula is reassuring, and that's the one thing about that popular culture teaches us, is that formula and genre are popular for reasons.
Mhm.
We have a genre with expectations, with formula, with tropes, and we play within those formula because it's reassuring, it's comforting, but we also just kind of give the little twist to make it feel like it's a fresh or new story.
Yeah.
And so that, yes, I totally get it.
And finding that twist to make it fresh, it can be very, very risky,
Mhm.
because it could go one way, or it could be like, this is way too much. And so it's very tricky to walk that line, which is why I started my writing, I guess my writing career at this point. I just wanted to write something that didn't have any rules. I just sat down at my computer. I was, in this phase of my life where it's like, I want to explore my love of writing, because it was something that I was always doing in the background. I come from a healthcare technology background, which I love the people I was working with, couldn't stand the work that I was doing. It just was like, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
And so I had the opportunity to kind of take some time away, explore writing as something that I could solely focus on, because for so long it was just like, something I snuck in after work, did during the weekends, did on a lunch break, what have you. So being faced with like, I can write whatever I want, and let's see what happens with it. That's how my first heroine came about, because she is a duchess that lives in like a fantasy world in medieval times. And it's like, what? Like, why would you ever think that that could work? But there was just something about, the world building behind it all. I've always been a huge fantasy fanatic. I absolutely love the Sword of Truth series by Terry Goodkind. Is just like one of my favorite things ever. And the world building that he did was something that was like, I want to do that for myself and create a world. And so I just kind of sat down. It's like, let's see where this goes. And what started out as, a 40 something page novella has now since turned into 14 books and all kinds of craziness. But it's all about that exploration and just finding what excites you and bringing it to the page.
I couldn't agree more with that part, and I thank you for kind of touching on these things. You're touching on a lot of things that I want to talk about more in length. I'm going to start back with a kind of a broad question. Who are some of your favorite writers and some of your favorite books when as you were growing up? Do you remember books that,
Oh gosh.
what were some of the ones that stand out in your early memories?
I know that a lot of mystery writers reference her, but Nancy Drew is my end all and be all of who I aspire to be. I remember so vividly, my parents had moved me from the beaches of Florida to the woods of Maine when I was 7 years old in the middle of winter. And I was just like, what is my life now? And I have this memory of going to probably one of the only Barnes and Noble in the state at the time, going there and getting this two-sided book of Secret of the Old Clock and the Hidden Staircase. It was flip for one side and read the book, and then flip it over and read the next one. And that book probably charted the course of the rest of my life. I have always she is just the coolest person, even though she's not real.
Right.
Role model.
She becomes real though.
Yes.
Right. Not just for young girls. I mean, Nancy Drew, the Hardy Boys, those are classics that I was also surrounded by as a child too.
And so timeless as well. That was something, it's it was something that connected me. And the fun thing about it is that because I was 7 years old, my reading comprehension for the Nancy Drew books at the beginning was a little bit too high for me. And so my dad would actually read them to me before bed, because he'd been away at work all day. He comes home and we have this connection time together. And I can still hear how he would use different voices for the characters, and how Bess said Nancy's name different than George and all of this stuff. And so they were just, it was such a wonderful, wonderful memory that carried me, very, very far. To this day, I have Nancy Drew's Guide to Life by my writing desk. but Nancy like set the ground for my love of mystery. Mary Higgins Clark, I got like really into Mary Higgins Clark when I was probably around 12 or 11. I like probably younger than I should have been
Yeah.
at the time, but I was fascinated with Mary Higgins Clark. Um, I eventually moved in more to fantasy as I was in high school and college. Terry Goodkind was a big influence. I also love The Wheel of Time.
Robert Jordan.
Yep.
Mhm.
And I I really got into Dan Brown's now. That's not fantasy. We're back in like his crazy like mix of historical fiction,
Right.
thriller, wonderfulness. Like I
And it was
was
fantasy
fascinated.
too. I think it ultimately it becomes
Yeah,
fantasy in a
I
way. Yes.
I was very much fascinated with his play of taking these historical moments and like creating something wild out of them.
Sure.
And then as I, began getting pulled into the cozy mystery genre, end all and be all, I love Denise Swanson's books. They like got me through like some really, really tough times and just really went to show that like a book can really be cathartic for you.
Hmm.
I love Julia Buckley's The Writer's Apprentice series. Oh my gosh, there's just so many. I definitely am a bookworm. More so when I was younger, because now I find that like so much of my time is always thinking about writing
Right.
and
Yes.
and
You lose
it's
that
hard. It's
sense of
hard to balance those.
ability. You want to write so much,
Yeah.
but you also you can imagine yourself taking a year or two and just catching up with reading,
Oh yeah.
in a perfect world,
Mhm.
you could just touch a book to your head and then 15 seconds later you absorbed it all, but still had the experience of reading it.
Yeah.
Right. No, I totally get it. It's like a fantasy, always have more books than you're ever going to read in your life.
Mhm.
Yes. That's what a wonderful memory you have of being read to. I'm just trying to imagine, had it been that you were given The Shining, at that moment. So Nancy Drew, how different your
Yeah.
life
Who
might have
knows what
been.
I would have turned
Going
out?
to the
Yeah.
harsh winter of Maine, reading The Shining might have done something different. But no, I was read to from infancy, like from in the womb.
Mhm.
And I could read before I went to kindergarten.
Mhm.
So I was like, why are my classmates? Why do they not know their ABCs? Why are they not reading books?
Mhm.
It just like, I just thought this is usual. And, yes, like you, a bookworm, books were just, I was just voracious. It just would read and
Yeah.
read. And some of the best gifts that, like to this day, I remember the joy of receiving books like for
Oh,
Christmas.
yep.
Um, yeah, I got a 6-pack or 8-pack of books like for Christmas one year. It was all H.G. Wells, The
Mhm.
Time Machine, Invisible Man, and War of the Worlds, Food of the Gods, and then like Frankenstein and Dracula, all, just all these classic horror and sci-fi books. And it was like the best thing in the world to just
Mhm.
read and get lost in these worlds. So I totally appreciate that fascination and that
Christmas
love that.
Christmas books are the best. Like I remember it my dad, he is a well, at the time he was just like a freelance helicopter pilot, so he would get called up kind of at the spur of the moment. It's like, hey, we need the power company needs you to like fly the power lines to make sure that there's none that are down. And there was one Christmas morning where he gets a call at 4 o'clock in the morning. It's like, hey, we need you to fly the line. And I was probably, I think, 11 at the time, and so Christmas is still like a super big deal. And so to have your dad just like go away from it, it's like, oh man, like what are we going to do? And thankfully my mom knew that my grandmother had purchased it must have been, I think it was the first 3 Harry Potter books in hardcover for me. And she's like, Sarah, why don't you open up these gifts while we wait? And I'm pretty sure that I was almost done with The Prisoner of Azkaban by the time he got home.
Oh,
So
that's
it
a
was just
big
like,
book. That's
it's a
not
big, I
that's
like,
not like a little picture book like Runaway
no, no, no,
Ralph.
no, no, it's not. I actually, it was funny. I challenged myself. I was like, I wonder how quickly I can read a Harry Potter book. And so while the football game was on, I was like, I'm going to see like how much of a Harry Potter book I can read during a football game. and I read the whole thing. So I was just like,
Wow.
I
Like a
I
speed reader. Would you consider yourself a speed reader then?
I would.
I mean, that's a 3 hour, 4 hour football game, and to
It
read
is, yeah.
500 pages, that's amazing.
It's but like the I don't know. I feel like I don't intentionally speed read, but I guess it's just like I'm so immersed in what's going on that it's just like woo. So
Yes. That's amazing.
it definitely came in handy for like in college when you're reading those awful textbooks.
Yes. Yes, the overpriced textbook. No,
Yes. You
that's,
crack
yes.
open once.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. That's amazing. I love that. Do you remember well, we talked a little bit about what you drew you into writing, all this reading. So do you remember the very first story that you ever wrote?
I I'm not sure if it was the first, but I definitely put together a picture book of I illustrated and wrote it of my dog and I going
Oh,
to the beach.
oh
And
boy.
she was a dog, she was a wonderful, wonderful dog. Her name was Honey, and she wasn't really a fan of swimming, and I just really, really wanted a dog that would swim around with me. So I ended up just writing a story where Honey magically wanted to go swimming, and we went to the beach and we swam. Um, that was probably the first ever story that I wrote. But then I had a habit of especially when I was in elementary school, that I would read a book that I really, really loved. And so then I would write my own version of it, which I guess equates today as like fanfic. So I was like really into writing my own fan fiction when I was a little kid, because I would, rewrite Arthur books, I would rewrite Boxcar Children books, I rewrote a ton of Nancy Drew books. Um,
Or did you imagine that you were Nancy's friend, or were you taking
oh
writing
yes.
Nancy? Yeah.
Oh no,
Okay.
I would, for at least in the Nancy Drew books, I was always her friend. I would never like deem myself as like I'm going to become Nancy.
Sure.
But there was she was always like, "Oh, I'm going to go visit my friend Sarah and leave behind Bess and George, and it's just going to be the two of us."
Right.
Yeah, I definitely had like all of these worlds that I was a part of, that I made myself a part of. And it was fun to kind of take someone else's the foundation that they'd already given me and build upon it, because it's a whole lot easier than when you have to start from scratch.
Yes, but you having that foundation, when you love that world and those characters,
Mhm.
you kind of have a sense then of how to build a world in a way. Like, you may not know how to do it, but you have a sense of what you want to accomplish, like the same
Mhm.
things that you felt reading Nancy, and that same sense of reality. These are people and places, like in fixed positions, who I know if I go to this shop, this person's always going to be here.
Mhm.
But you also have a place where it's also full of mystery and wonder, and it becomes very real even
Yeah.
within the fantasy. So, and that's kind of lovely that you mentioned that, because that was like my next thing I wanted to ask about, was world building, and how, because you've got three multiple series.
Mhm.
So how do you go about designing your world? And you could pick any of the series as you want. I mean, you mentioned the fantasy, the Middle Ages
Mhm.
series, that you I'm assuming we can talk more, but I'm assuming you did some research for that. But the world that you created whole cloth, I mean, I'll let you talk. How did you design your worlds?
I always, and regardless of where something takes place, I always start with drawing a map. I am, despite like all the time I spend writing, like I'm a very visual person. I love to just like sit down and like draw out like where I think things are, so that I can also like understand like, how long is it going to take to get from point A to point B for my character. The book that is coming out in February takes place on the Delaware coastline. And what I ended up doing is, I looked at a map of Delaware and try to decide like, okay, like in what general vicinity is this town, this fictional town, going to take shape, so that it's anchored somewhat in reality, and then I can kind of go off on my own and do what I like. But I always draw a map of where, the different buildings, and especially in a cozy mystery, the different businesses that you're finding along in the downtown area
Yes.
or up by the
Right.
beachside, just so that I have a sense of like, okay, if my character lives here, it's going to take her 12 minutes to drive here. It's going to take her 5 minutes to walk here. And just to have like a sense of the layout of the world.
Yeah.
And that's when once I have that like understanding of how big it is and where things are in relation to the main character, that's when I can get into the little details of like, okay, well, what type of shop is this, or what is the name of the shop? I love to do that. Often the setting really takes shape more than the characters at first, because I like to, especially in cozies where you have all of these like beautiful, cute little towns that you can visit. I love to create the businesses that are there and like picture like what would my ideal small town business strip look like. And from there, you begin to meet and are introduced to the types of people that are running those establishments. So it's funny how like the setting is really a character in itself.
Yes.
And how it develops and grows. I In regards to research, I try to understand, especially since the series that I write, I don't live in the exact areas that these take place. In my Glenmire Whim mysteries, they take place in upstate New York. I don't live in upstate. I do live in New York, but I did spend some time there when I was in college. So I have like an understanding of the region. Another series that I actually am getting ready to publish in the near future. So another one to add to the mix, which is a book blogger mysteries. They take place in Massachusetts, and I lived there for a time. But I always like I'm removed enough from the small town scene that I like to develop in a cozy mystery, so that I still have to like figure out like, okay, well, how did this differ from my experience? How can I make it as authentic as possible? But also, how can I make it as warm, welcoming, and just inviting? So it's always funny to like be Googling different things about different areas. One thing that I had to do in regard for Delaware is like I needed to understand like their seafood industry and what the seasons of seafood were, because depending on what's going to be on the menu at these restaurants or what's going to be catered at this event. So
And
like
who's catching the seafood?
exactly, yeah.
Mhm.
So it's great because I have like resources in my life that I can reach out to be like, hey, like, I've got some questions about boats, and can you like clarify for me like what this like boating term might be, or what would like someone who knows a lot about boats but also understands that the main character doesn't know anything about boats, like where do they meet in the middle? And real estate is another thing. I have a friend who is in real estate, and it's like I'm always asking him, it's like, is this something that could actually happen, or am I just like totally going off the rails? And it's funny because truth is, stranger than fiction most of the time. And it's like, oh, well, you could do something as wild as this and have it actually work. So it's great to have those real life resources, because otherwise your Google search history can get really suspicious.
VPN. I'm just going to
Yeah.
suggest, yes, VPN. Yeah, it's this is why I'm so thrilled to be doing this podcast, is because listening to you talk about your world building, it's reminded me of, because my first series is a cozy series, and it was basically the same kind of feelings and process. It started with the town,
Mhm.
and like you've kind of based them on places that you've been or lived to a degree. That was the cozy series. The Town of Juniper is based on a town I grew up in here in Ohio, Vermillion, right on the Lake Erie, about a half hour west of Cleveland. And the layout of the town is basically the same. I mean, there's a few modifications, but for the most part,
Mhm.
geographically, the the downtown strip is a place that I always envisioned. There was a bank on the corner of Main and the main street, the big corner, the big intersection, and there was all these like second story business buildings that were vacant. And I always imagine how wonderful it would be to kind of live up there in that
Mhm.
apartment, looking over the main street and the hustle and bustle of all the cute little shops, because there are a bunch of cute little shops on that side.
Mhm.
And that's where I put the character. And so everything I write about through this character, all of her memories, at least most of them, are mine from growing up in this town. So it
Mhm.
feels genuine because they are, for the most part, genuine. And the places and the people from Vermilion who've read this book know immediately what the place is. The gas
Mhm.
station is right there. It's the name is different, but they know, yes, that was a station. Or, and so for them, or even for people who don't live there, there's enough of that small town kind of charm, and
Mhm.
sometimes that little incestuous, small town, everyone's in everyone's business,
Mhm.
um, where people who grew up in small towns, it resonates with them too.
Yeah.
So, but I just love that process was so similar. It's like, because I have a map that's ongoing, and I hope to put it in the final book. Like, okay, now after I've done the 4-book series and I've expanded and done everything in the town, here you go. Here's a real picture of it. But and I did too. I pulled up a map of the town, Googled it, and I kind of like, okay, and I just kind of use that as a rough sketch, and kind of,
Mhm.
right now I have certain places, and with every book as it expands, you have new businesses and new
Yep.
characters, and so I'm like, okay, where's this going to go? And I just, you
It's
know
always fun to like figure out like where am I going to fit this group in, or where am I going to fit this? Like right now I'm working on book 2 in my Glenmire Whim Mysteries, and uh there's a yoga studio that I am like trying to figure out like, well, where exactly is this going to be located? Because I was pretty like, as I was describing the town, I was filling in for the reader, like, here's the like row of shops that you have access to. And it's like, okay, well, now I need to like squeeze in a new building somewhere along this like area. And so it's fun to like to tweak things, and or maybe you have to like sunset another business. It's like, oh yeah, they left town and I'm taking their new space, and all this stuff.
mhm.
I think that being able to put so much of yourself into your town is like it makes it even much, I think, more realistic, and more like that sense of warmth that you're looking for. I think how I've always, I think, identified with cozy mysteries is that I have craved little towns like that. I grew up, my like neighbors were like very spread out across fields and dirt roads, and we didn't have a downtown area. Like me, I think we had a general store for a little while,
Mhm.
but it was just like, it was just sprawling land. And I always, when I was reading those descriptions of towns where it's like you could go get your ice cream, you could go out and have have a meal, you could swing by a bookstore, then you could go to the arcade, like all of this cool stuff. It's like, oh man, like that's my dream. So when I'm writing cozy mysteries, it's more of this like me like living out these little fantasies of like, this is where I wish I could live.
Sure, it makes perfect sense. It's kind of like if you ever lived in a college town. If you're a college student, that's
Mhm.
that kind of small bubble
Yeah, the
surrounds the
bubble.
town,
Mhm.
and you feel like the outside world really doesn't enter into the campus. And so it is very similar in that regard, and it is kind of wonderful. That allows you to kind of play with how you want this town to be, because it does become a character. The town, not only the people, but the town itself.
Sure.
And I was very cognizant of the fact that I wanted to create a town that in a way was not stuck in time. That's stuck is the wrong word, but it certainly didn't mind having a sense of there's an anachronistic. It isn't looked upon as a bad thing. So
Mhm.
like the gas station has been there for since the 1950s, and but the fuel pumps are something that are still have like the rollers, the tumblers, that were from the 1970s, and
Mhm.
had the hose that came out and you ran over, the kids would run over with their bikes and hear the ding ding. That's this kind of stuff that I did. And there's an old movie theater, and I just you have the sense of place.
Mhm.
And it's rewarding. I've found, like, when people talk about how the town feels to them and how they want to visit that town,
Mhm.
and they want to go to Sugars and have some pancakes or whatever, that's rewarding, because then I know it feels real to them too. And that's as a writer, you can't really ask for much more than that, for the people to feel like they've already invested themselves and they're all like, I want to live in this town. That could be a wonderful thing.
For sure.
Yeah. Well, since we're talking about worlds, is there an aspect of your world, and you could pick any one you want, that you like the most?
Oh man.
I know it's hard because the word, you kind of fall in love with these
You do.
the
And I
worlds.
think in each of them there is just something about it that's like that I've invested so much into. In my Court of Mystery series, I mean, I'm just like, I love royalty. I love the history of the royals. I love that this like the pomp and circumstance and just all of this, the pageantry behind it. And so like I really love writing about the banquets and the grand galas that they have, but also because it like revolves a lot around food. And I I love food. And it's something that like when I'm writing those scenes, it's like it feels like so much fun, and just like being a part of that pageantry, but also like writing about these tasty little morsels that maybe because it's set in a fantasy world, it's something that's like we haven't heard of that before. But it's fun to have that experience. With my Glenmeyer Whim mysteries, the twist to the whole cozy experience is that my main character, she comes from a family where they all have these special abilities that are called whims, because they're little things. They're not like these, they don't have magic. They're not witches. They're not wizards, but they all have these fun little abilities. And something that you had mentioned earlier, where you could put a book up to your head and just like know all the contents. Each member of the family has their own special ability, and Hazel's mom has the ability to touch a book and get all the information that's inside of it. And so it's really fun to come up with the different gifts that they have, where poor Hazel, her gift is that she can see a little clock over everyone's heads around her that's showing how much time they have left on Earth. So she knows when everyone around her is going to die.
That's
basically.
heavy.
It's
That's
heavy.
super heavy.
Luckily, she has these special glasses that her great aunt created for her that obscure those clocks, unless like,
Okay.
oops, my glasses slipped down and now I know when you're going to die.
Oh, jinkies, right. Yeah,
So it's this like light story that like really has some pretty heavy implications, and that's how she's able to figure out like when people are murdered versus when people have like met their maker naturally, is because of the limits that her gift has. But creating those like different abilities, like I think she's pretty much the only one who has one that you're like, ew, I wouldn't want that.
Yes.
And of course, she's the main character.
Sounds fantastic. Right.
Yeah. So of course she's the main character, and so there's only like little references to the other abilities that her family has, but the one with her mom being able to like touch a book and just know what's in it is like, that's something that I really love. And I was really proud of myself when I came up with that ability, because you have your kind of normal ones where, oh, like so and so can hear what people are thinking, so and so can predict the weather. It's like I wanted more that were like, this is a really weird thing to have,
but you'd kind of want it as a reader. You're
exactly.
like, yeah, I kind of want that. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's just so much about each of the different places that like has a part of me in it that like is just more is me living vicariously through the character. So I think that and that is a great, I guess, motivator for me, because it makes me want to return to the world and to keep investing myself in it, because it's like, oh, I got to get back to my new book, hashtag follow me for murder, takes place in Central Shores, Delaware. It's like, I got to get back to Central Shores because, my main character, she's like super popular online. She always knows what to say. She's super witty. And it's like, I wish I was like that. So let me just like take some of her magic for myself.
And then you have to be super witty to write her effectively.
Yes.
You have to, once you get in that mindset, if you are being her, then you have to be on top of your game at that point.
Yeah, and it's tricky. It's funny because her friend, she has a friend in the book. His name is Jasper, and his like level of snarkiness, like he is just like, I'm gonna say it like it is, and very much into pop culture references, and his I guess brand of wit and funniness is something that just comes more easily to me as a writer. I would never say that I am a funny person in real life. Like it takes me a really long time to like come up with a snappy comment. But his brand of funny is a lot easier for me to make or is a lot easier for me to convey to readers than Coco's brand of funny. And so it's tricky because it's like, man, why are my supporting characters sometimes a whole lot easier to write about than my main character who I should know inside
Yes,
and out?
right. Yes. That's that's very true, because sometimes they just take on that life of their own
You do.
unexpectedly, because they all have unique relationships with the main character, and I think it's where they shine. It's not as simple as like a hero and a foil.
Mhm.
It But it is a way to define the main character through the relationships that that character has,
Yeah.
with the other characters. So no,
And
I get that. That's fun.
I'm very much into, at least for, I guess, yeah, all of the books that I've written. My main character, yes, she's the one that you're getting the point of view and everything's focused on, but like their friends, all of my characters, their friends are like there to support them.
Hmm.
Like nobody is actively trying to tear them down. No one's like discouraging them. It's like, you really shouldn't be doing this. It's like, we accept you, we love you for who you are, we'll help you however we can. And so I really like the strong friendships and the
Hmm.
loyalty that they all have is something, and it's something that readers have pointed out, which always makes me, what you were talking about, folks saying, I want to visit the town and I want to have, go to Sugars and have pancakes. um I When people are like, I really wish that I had a friend like Poppy, or I really wish that I had a friend group like, Duchess Jax has, because it's just like they are there for each other. And
Hmm.
that's always like, I love creating characters that people can relate to, but to have characters that people just want to be in their lives to support them is like next level, and always like so rewarding to hear about.
Oh, I totally agree. That was kind of the one of the main plot elements of my cozy series, is the main character Abby. She just found herself out of a job, and so she's coming home to kind of recoup, being surrounded by her friends and family. So
Mhm.
she's depressed because she doesn't know what she wants to do, and all the things that come with losing a job. But it's through that love and support of those people around her that kind of gives her that sense of safety and security,
Mhm.
and that allows her to not only rest and find, perhaps herself on a journey of healing and recovery, but it also, having that base level, it also allows her to get involved with the mystery.
Mhm.
She is able to get involved with this mystery, um, but also it becomes a two, like a parallel storyline. We've got the
Mhm.
mystery that's working, and we also have her sense of or journey towards healing. So
Yeah.
they kind of work hand in hand. And that's one thing as a writer, is it's not my genre, normally. So it was different for me to kind of write in with a character and trying to get involved with her thoughts, and to go with not only what was happening and creating an engaging story and other characters, but to have this a narrator. The narrator goes back and forth between like this third person omniscient to Abby. Sometimes will finish the sentences of the narrator, so it jumps back and forth where you see her thoughts showing up. And I found that those parts where she is trying to work things out, and integral parts of the book, really therapeutic in a way and kind of cathartic, because it allowed me to start thinking about the things that she's feeling and processing
Mhm.
those hard emotions. And so it's cozy in that there's cozy elements, but like yours, it was kind of, I don't know if dark is the word, but there was some darkness in that she's going through this journey that she will be over the course of the 4-book series, where she's trying to kind of self-actualize. I'm using Maslow's hierarchy of needs as a structure here. And so that's why the base needs were so important in this first book. And now that that's evolved, the second book, she's moved up a little bit to where now she's looking at connections and relationships and who she is. And that's a lot murkier, it's a lot muddier of a kind of thing. And so that's, now she's just too much in her own head, so she's like, and that was kind of fun because again, it ties into seasonal things. This is a spring book, so there's the ugliness of spring, and before it becomes pretty, it got the leftover remnants of winter and everything's dead and wet and gross. And so there was a lot of the symbolism was just too great to not mind from, but I love that support system is important, and it has to be real and earned. And so
it has to be something that like can, what you were talking about, like it can carry through your series. I always write with something being a series in mind. Like, even if it's like, I don't really know where this is going, but like, I definitely don't want to leave this character just yet. And I want to continue exploring, their relationships and the world around them, and being able to cultivate those friendships that people care about. It's like, okay, like you can carry these people and like follow their lives into the next book. Yes, there's going to be a murder that they're going to track down and have all kinds of fun, uncovering, who done it. But, there always has to be like some type of subplot going on to carry people forward, so that once the mystery is wrapped up, they're not like, okay, well, I don't have to ever visit this place again.
Right. Or 2-1 note. It's the same formula over and over again. Woman with 5 cats solves murders in a cupcake factory, right. Because the trope is so easy. It's the challenge is to creating those moments. And I think readers, and we as writers, we know when it's feeling forced, we know when it feels genuine. And your main character has that friend, like yours with her groups of friends, and you say, oh, I wish I had my friends like that. And in the case of mine, Abby, one of her best friends is his name is Ray, and they've been friends ever since childhood. And the relationship it's not romantic or sexual. It's not, I won't even say there's flirtiness, but it's not like going to go anywhere. It's just because Ray's an instigator and he's like being silly, like reminds me a lot of my childhood, like growing up with my cousins in a way. Not the flirtiness, that sounds creepy, but there was a lot of love and goofing around. It was like good-natured ribbing and joking. And that's kind of how what I pulled from a base, because I'm not a romance writer. I don't plan on putting romance in these books. So, but I had that years of real love and joking and family and togetherness. And that's kind of what I crammed into this relationship between these two characters. There's a lot of healthy antagonism and joking and kidding. It's truly loving as you could be without being romantic or sexual, what I found was interesting is that people were reading it as sexual flirtation or romantic flirtation. And I, again, never intending it, I'm like, I don't see it. And I thought that was really wonderful moment where I'm getting reader response and they're reading into it something that I never intended. And they're asking me like, what's going to happen? Are Ray and Abby going to get together? You got to tell us, and I just thought that it was so this was my first book. I'd written other things, but I'd never written a novel before. And I was just fascinated by that experience. Did you get those kinds of feedback early on? I mean, you've been writing a ton of books. So early on, you were having to kind of deal with all these kinds of things and kind of figure out what you wanted to do. So what kind of reader response were you getting from?
So I don't know, this might not be the way to write a book. But I like to listen to what readers what their feedback is. And, because my story can be changed. It can, I have not written the last book in this series, and I'm talking about my Court of Mystery series right now. And, I had in my mind when I had the idea, it's like, I can make this into something more than just a 40-page novella. I can build a world around this, and I can create drama and tension and all of this stuff. And I had a plan of who was going to end up with who, how everybody was going to get there happily ever after. And as I was writing it, I felt that I was going in that direction and it was working. And as I was seeing reader feedback, I was seeing the opposite of, what my intentions were. And I changed my vision, because as I began writing more and more and more about these characters, the connections that were there were so deep and so they were just real compared to what I had kind of planned, pieces on a chessboard to move into place. And so I made the decision. I was like, I think I'm going to have to change who people end up with. Because not only was there just like such a, people just loved this one character that I was like, I hate him. I'm ready to get rid of him. And because in my head, I knew where I was going. And I like had these predetermined feelings. I was like, I know what I'm doing with this character and it's not going to be good. But there was just something that, and honestly, it came from when I started working with a producer for my audiobooks, and hearing her bring to life these characters. That's when everything changed for me, because the emotion and conviction that she portrayed them with, I was like, oh my God, I was going to kill this character off. And I was like, after listening to this performance, I couldn't do it. And so I'm like sitting in front of, book, oh my gosh, it was probably book 7 at the time. And I was like, how am I going to fix this? Cause I had laid the groundwork in my mind of how I'm going to get rid of this character. And thank goodness some divine force was like, here you go. This is how you can fix it. And I just decided to go in a whole different direction. And I have not regretted it a moment since. I know that there are a lot of people that are like, I don't listen to readers. I don't read reviews. I'm going to present the story that I have. And I so admire those people because like, I can't help it. I'm a people pleaser. But it was definitely hearing those characters and hearing the performance of the words that I wrote, just acted out almost. And I could just see it in my mind. And I was like, I can't separate these two.
Someone else is interpreting your work in a way that's not how you intended it, but it also kind of gave you a fresh insight into what it was for them.
And I think if I honestly think if I had not heard that performance, I probably would not have changed my end goal and my game plan. But because I did, I was like, what am I going to do? Like, how am I going to like make this? How am I going to fix this? And then how am I going to keep carrying it on?
Sure.
And it just like, it opened up so many doors for me that I'm like, best decision ever. And also it's like, now I've got these ideas for a spinoff series and all of this great stuff. And, so it was an instance where reader feedback was just like, so they knew what I didn't know. And that was, I think that was a really exciting thing for me to explore.
That's amazing. I remember going to a book club meeting of some friends who had we're all basically from the same town, the real town, Vermilion, Juniper, and they formed a book club because the book was they wanted to see if the characters were people based on who I knew and the places, and that was some of the feedback I got because I asked them, said, what needs to be fixed for book 2, what needs to be changed or added, and they all said like, well, Abby needs some friends. Not like she has friends in the first book, but like friends she went to school with, other than Ray, other than her grandma, she needs like real friends. I'm like, oh, okay, because I was so fixated on the story, trying to work that out, and it makes sense. I even address it in the second book, because Abby's in a different headspace and she's looking back at that. Just like your needs are trying to get food and shelter. You're not worried about painting a picture, so she was in a different headspace, and now so that's evolving. So those relationships are being brought in. But that feedback is good. I understand that concept because people have been asking about, Abby and Ray, and I tell them it's like I don't have any plans to
Mhm.
put them together, and they're like they're disappointed. I'm like,
Yeah.
but
And it's such like it's I don't know.
because it's not what's what they want, but
Yeah.
I kind of play with that a little bit in the second book, like
Mhm.
just bringing up some unexpected jealousy on Abby's part that she wasn't she's shocked to have, like, why am I
Mhm.
even thinking about this when it comes to Ray? We've been lifelong friends. So based on what they were asking, I see this is the bad part, I guess. I'm like, oh, you wanted it. I was gonna kind of be very manipulative. And so it was reader feedback, but
Mhm.
I'm kind of like taunting. I'm a little twisting it. I'm having fun with it because I know at the end of the day, spoiler alert, they're not going to be together. But I certainly don't mind playing with it if it
Mhm.
if it engages the readers more. If we're like, but I've made no bones about it from the beginning. Um, they're not, but I think they want it. So I love
Yeah.
that. That's great. Um, yeah, that's fantastic. Let's talk about your characters. How do you create your characters and develop them? We know you got your main character, those circles of friends, you have these groups, but when you go through the process of creating characters, can you talk a little bit about that?
I usually do so I kind of do an essay with my main character where I sit down, I write it hand with my hand because it feels more organic and I feel more of the you know really diving deep, almost like a diary entry of who this character is, what their goals are, what their biggest accomplishments are, what their fears are. I think a lot of the time in character development, you have all of these great things about your character, especially in cozy mysteries where you want to highlight how wonderful your character is. But then there's also this like everybody is flawed. We all have our cons to our pros. And I like to present characters that are as realistic as possible. So yes, I have main characters that are self-centered. They're thinking about them at the end of the day. It's like, okay, like what does this mean for me? I have characters that are, they're thinking about money and like, okay, I can afford this much this month, or I can spend some money on something that is rather materialistic because who doesn't like to buy something nice for themselves every once in a while? And I think that sometimes folks can find those flaws jarring because like, why are you like showcasing the negatives of a character? But it's like, that's what makes life life. Like you're not perfect all the time. So you have to like really see both sides of who your main character is, not just like what their strengths are, why they're the one to solve this case. I think understanding those flaws is just as important, if not more important than their strengths, because they can develop and possibly overcome those flaws. Maybe they just learns like I got to tone it down a little bit, but I can't give up being concerned about being self-centered because hey, I'm a social media influencer and I like my whole purpose in life is to influence people to be like me. And so it's fun to explore kind of the darker bits of a character. But no, I like to just like take some time with them. I write an essay that never sees the light of day. It's usually pretty unreadable by the time I'm done with it because I'm just writing so fast and like everything is coming out so I can understand who this character is. But then once that's written, I go and I really just put together these little blurbs about each of the main character and the main supporting characters, so that I have this nice little Bible for reference of, this is my character, this is what she looks like, this is her age, this is her birthday. Because a lot of the time, when time's passing in a cozy mystery, it's like, what's going on? Like, how old is this person at this
Sure.
point in time? Because, they were 21 at this point in their, when they were solving this mystery, and then we're 3 years later, but they're still 21. Like, what's going on? So like making sure that I have all of these like logical just like kind of facts about them in order so that I can have these like handy dandy references, and always making sure that like for hair color, skin color, eye color, making sure they're the same for each in each book. So I'm not like using, her hair was mousy brown, and then in the next book, unless it's, she's dyed it or something, and her hair is mahogany brown or something along those
Sure.
lines, just to keep that continuity. So I have these like handy dandy reference points. But then because I write mysteries about amateur sleuths, you also have to like weave in this element of, why does this person care? I love mysteries way too much, but I am not going out and, butting my nose into my local police force and trying to solve their cases for them.
Sarah, here, I'm going to help you. Just
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, like, I have arrived. What do you need me to solve?
That's right.
And in a cozy mystery, like, that has to be believable. Like, why on earth is, a candle maker, a social media influencer, a duchess, like, why are they sticking their noses where, there are other people to take care of these issues for them? So I
You have
think
to make it personal. You have to make it right. You have to find some way of pulling them in and making them care.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
And then you begin to think like, well, if I was in this situation, like, how would I even do this? So you really have to like pull and dig to figure out like what is inside of this character that is really making them, to step into this role that is most certainly they are not qualified for.
Right. Yeah. I guess one of the reasons, not having read cozies, before I started writing, I knew I didn't want to do the kind of the murder thing, and I think that's makes it a little bit easier in some way to have the main character kind of being pulled in. And then the first story, what happens basically, the people she knows, people are getting these mysterious packages, and so whatever's in the package, it acts as some kind of a catalyst or agent for change.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the name of the series, Seasons Change. So each season brings about some element of change, and how difficult that change can be if it's thrust upon you. And so Abby kind of lives this out, because the change thrust upon her is, oh, she's lost a job. What's she going to do? And so she gets pulled in because the most important person in her world is her grandma, who gets this package, which kind of interrupts things and causes this disruption. And as more and more people in the town get these packages, that's what pulls her in,
Mm-hmm.
like, and so it has to be something that's very personal. And then the second book, it's more something that happens through, she has a job now, and it's something that happens through her job. She's trying to locate some things, and that's part of the mystery. Is like all of these things from these certain years are
Mm-hmm.
missing. So that's part of it. And you think, oh, that's not much, but it's tied in, in through the other elements of the story, of course. And so you have to find that way of making it personal for their character,
Mm-hmm.
and the people around her. Like, why should the reader care?
Yeah.
Which is like why you developed, I think, the character or those subplots, as you say. You have to have something else going on, so it's not just a whodunit.
Yeah.
And I love that you go out of your way to find those flaws, and you've developed so much into your characters, because even Sherlock Holmes had a cocaine habit, so we have to have those.
But like, no,
flaws.
like, that's never really anything that anybody like talks about when you think of Sherlock Holmes. Like, the first thing that comes to mind is like, oh, he uses cocaine. So it's nice to see that, like, even with these flaws that all of these characters have, and the great characters have, it's still not the defining factor for them.
Right. It's just part of their personality.
Exactly. It's
Yes.
just something that's like, it's who they are, and everyone has good and everyone has bad, and just finding the way to live your best life and be the kindest person you can be.
Yeah, that's a good message. But that's what I found most exciting about these characters. My process was to create the town, the places, and then put the people in the shops who's going to run this, like very much like you did, and then trying to find some kind of something about them that was interesting. Not everyone can be quirky or interesting. Some people are just straightforward.
Yeah.
But I knew there was a character who I wanted to be the I was inspired by the first scene of Hamlet, where the guards are talking. And like the new guard shows up, hey, what's going on? Well, here's all this stuff happening, and Fortinbras, and here it catches the audience up on everything up to this point.
Mhm.
And I wanted that character in this book series. And so I made her a dog walker. And so it's one of the first people Abby runs into. And she's this cute, perky blonde who's like wearing like spandex like from the 80s, and her hair's up in a neon collar, and she's got like 10 dogs, and she's just bouncing full of energy, and she's like this complete nonstop talker, this flibberty
Mhm.
gibbet, but you can't help but fall in love with her. She's like annoying at first, but then you really
Mhm.
see that she's such a sweet person,
Yeah.
that she likes knowing what's going on, but she's not like nosy and condemning. She just likes to know everything.
Mhm.
And to be able to kind of create this character and have the other, like the main character, react to her over the course of the book, from being like annoyed to like kind of like, oh, this, I was really wrong when I judged her, and I'm glad I'm in a healthier mental place that
Mhm.
I can see the wonderful character she is. Being able to do that felt really good as a writer,
Yeah.
because then it also, the relationship then changed after that. And that was something that I really didn't honestly expect. I didn't have it plotted out, I'm
Mhm.
on my 20-page outline. It's just, here's
I
what
love the
happens.
I love the
Yeah.
characters that like you don't expect them to like take center stage, or you don't expect them to like stay around longer than you had planned for them to stay around. But then like by the end, you're like, I can't say goodbye to them. How do I continue weaving them in future books? And
Right.
those characters are my favorites because it's just like there's obviously like this big connection between me as the writer and between the characters themselves. It's always like very, very fulfilling to be like, I can't say goodbye to this person yet. So
Hmm.
now, like in my Court of Mystery series, my main character, Duchess Jacqueline, she has like an entourage at this point because she's just like accruing all of these people that she comes across, and it's like, I can't say goodbye to you yet. And I didn't have plans
She's a metaphor for you as a writer, right? I mean,
yeah, it's like all of these books that I just didn't plan on writing.
well, no, the
Um,
characters you can't leave behind. That was the metaphor. I mean,
yeah.
she's expressing what you had just said about, you create these characters that you don't want to leave behind, and that's
Mhm.
exactly, she's
Yeah.
she's kind of keeping them all there.
And it's funny because it's like I never had plans for her to really have like this huge group of people around her, because part of her one of her flaws is that like she's very, she has this mask that she wears all the time. She's been trained since she was born to be stoic, to never let people in, to break down that barrier, because you have to make tough decisions when you're a ruler of a nation, and you can't afford to let emotion really get in the way of logical decision making. And these are the people though that have like broken down those defenses. And so I'm at the point now when I'm writing that it's like, oh man, like I have too many characters that I'm juggling. And I know that like as much as this particular book series bends a lot of the rules when it comes to writing I call it a medieval cozy. It, it is I'm at the point where it's like I know I've got too many people and I've got to kind of juggle things so that maybe Jax and her friends are separated so that two of them have an adventure with her while the others are over here doing their own little thing. And so it's work to like figure out, like now that I've created all of these people, it's like, well, what do I do with them?
Right.
But I'm still like, I can't say goodbye. And what we were talking about, like reader feedback, and when you get a review that's like, oh, I miss so and so being in this book more, it's like, yep, you and me both. But it's like I can't have everybody in a scene at once, or it's going to be chaos.
Right. Yeah, you can't write. They're always at the stadium. They're all of them are at the dance at the same time.
Yeah.
500 people together. Yes. Well, I've been introducing new characters. Well, I'm on the second book. I'm introducing about 15 new characters,
Mhm.
and you still have the old ones. But I think it's important as I expand this town, because it's only a 4-book series. So by the end, there's going to be probably well over 100 characters to know. But I knew shortly after I wrote the first book, and as I talked a little bit about this in a previous show, I um I wanted to do something genre bending. I wanted to write a horror story set in the same cozy town with the same cozy characters and like kill them all, like everybody in the whole town. And my wife's like, you can't do that. People are going to be angry. I'm like, I I know, but I thought, well, there's a simple solution. The plague comes in, there you go for your if you want to wipe everybody out. But um because I'm not making it part of the cozy series. To me, it's
Mhm.
just if I've got all these characters who are really well developed, part of me as the writer, I want people who've read the series and who've fallen in love with these characters
Mhm.
to be genuinely moved by the fact that I just so callously kill them all. But I also uh, want to be able to say this is a separate story. I write in
Mhm.
multiple genres. This is a horror story, but I've never seen that kind of one setting for one genre be the setting of another genre.
Yeah.
King writes horror, but he's got all these little places, but it's all horror.
Mhm.
So, but so I love that about the reader feedback, and some of my diehard readers are excited about that horror story. They're like,
Mhm.
I just want to see how you're going to do it, you
Yeah.
know,
That's
and
I
they,
mean
yeah.
that's wild. I for the folks that it's like, oh, I missed, this character in your previous book. What I do from like for a interactive standpoint, when I'm not writing a book, I'm also like trying to create content that just anybody can access, if they're a subscriber on my newsletter. And so I write these short stories where my supporting characters are the main character, and Duchess Jacqueline is just kind of like this, she's on the outskirts of their experience. And so it's a nice way to not only just like kind of see the world from a different perspective, but they're fun little outings where it's like one of them is, what do I get somebody for a gift, where the other person is like, oh, I'm getting a new job, like how am I feeling, what's going on. And so it's offering more insight into the characters and the world that I'm building. But it's not officially a part of the main storyline, although I'm beginning to like weave some bonus content in where it's like, well, if you sign up for my newsletter, you'll be able to see like some foreshadowing of what's going to be happening in the next book that I haven't even written yet. And so it becomes really fun, and I can see why there's so many authors out there that love to put Easter eggs into everything that they do. And I love putting Easter eggs into these short stories because
Mhm.
it's just, not only is it fun for me, but it's also like a really helpful tool for like, oh, I have to remember to do this when I'm writing the manuscript down the road, or I need to circle back to this and make all of these references make sense. So it's a fun little like detour that I go on, but it's
Yeah,
also helping me on my main quest.
I love that. Um, that's great. I like the Easter egg concept. I did a lot of that and popular culture references in the movies that I wrote, and I do that in my cozy with names and ideas.
Mhm.
Character names are sometimes based on movies or TV shows a little bit that people don't pick up on,
Mhm.
and that's delightful to me because they're not getting the reference. Some people get it,
Mhm.
they get it right away, and that's also wonderful as well. But that Easter egg thing is wonderful. But I like the notion of what you're doing is reminds me a little bit of, there's a book that came out. I'm not sure if you're a fan of Star Wars or not. Are you a fan? Oh, okay, there you go. Well, from a certain point of view, if you are familiar with that book, it came out a couple years ago. It was basically a book of
I don't
short
think
stories
so.
by multiple science fiction writers, and what they were
Mhm.
doing was writing stories with the secondary and tertiary characters from Star Wars and writing a short story about them. Like
Okay.
there's a one story about the guy who runs the trash compactor or something, like that. Just these little tiny vignettes that kind of
Yeah.
let you see this in a different way. And
Yes,
it's
that's
it's
good.
it's funny that you mentioned that because people have been asking, like, I know when I'm done with this 4-part series, yes, I'm killing everybody off, but when I'm done, I'm gonna kind of miss these characters too.
Oh, for
And
sure.
I'll still want, I might have more stories. And I have kind of done the same thing as you did. I've already started working on little tiny stories and snippets from other characters' points of view. So it's not just Abby as she goes through her day, but it's going to be Miranda Cohen, the dog walker, and her, how is she going to tell a story through her eyes, or the other people in town. So I love that concept. And it must be something with you have a much, much longer ongoing series than I ever will. But once you start creating these characters and you start loving them, you kind of see their value and worth. And as they become more developed, even beyond what you imagine, that is a way to spend more time with them and as to see the world through their eyes. So as a writer and a reader, it's very fulfilling.
Yeah, I think when I felt that, when I was like, I'm not ready to say goodbye to these characters, I was reaching the point in my Court of Mystery series where, and this was actually, it wasn't even the Court of Mystery at this point, because I had like created these like two separate eras for my main character. And this was back when it was just like light, fun, little, like, oh, we're going to solve a mystery, woohoo. And it all culminated with her wedding. And I realized it's like, yes, she's getting married. She's not dying. Like there's more that she can do in this huge realm that I've created. Like, why would I ever stop here just because, she's found her happily ever after?
Right.
And so I think that was when I had the realization. It's like, this is like just been the building blocks of what I can achieve and what I could explore in this world. And so it was like, it became almost this little prequel series before we get into the darker, kind of, play for power, as well as we're solving mysteries while we're trying to free everybody from tyranny and all of this good stuff. And it definitely, like, I had this plan in mind, and it's like, well, I wasn't ready to say goodbye at this point in time. So it's like, well, I'm just gonna keep going.
Sure. Yeah. I think readers react to that too. They're happy with it as well. I mean, that's the whole point of Stephen King's misery. I don't want to, you're not allowed to kill this character off. And right. And that book inspired me in a way to write something other than cozy mystery. Although I always wanted to be a writer I've always written all kinds of things, whatever was making me happy. But I went from cozy mystery to splatter Western because I thought I want to show my range here, but yes, I love that. Well, speaking of characters, I want to ask you, of all the characters you've made, which character would you most like to have a drink with?
Oh man.
And why?
Oh,
it's hard to pick one, right? Because
really hard.
I get it, because I was trying to think the same thing. I'm like, there's like 5 or 6 that I would really like to sit down and talk with.
And it's hard to, because like, again, like with the different series, it's like, how do you pick just one? Because
let's pick one from the traditional cozy mystery series. So we'll
okay.
I'll let you we'll pick with that.
I would say from oh gosh, I think it would have to be Jasper Hastings, who is my main character's best friend since 2nd grade. And the reason why I would want to have drinks with him is because he just knows how to have fun. And after the years, I guess we've all had at this point, I would want to go out and, he's somebody that's like, he's going to critique everybody around him. So he's got that like sassy, like that sassy vibe about himself. But he's also like, spot on with all of his pop culture movie references. And just somebody that like, just genuinely is a person that's like, he's got your back, but he'll also tell you like, wow, you look bad. So
he's a real honest, true friend who can be completely honest with you, because he knows that underlying it, there's a love there. It's not challenged.
Exactly. So he's right. The definition of ride or die. And I'm working on writing book 2 right now. And, the whole premise is that Jasper, his reputation is on the line because he was the last person seen with the person that is murdered, and they were seen having a very public confrontation. And so it's up to Coco to like, I got to clear my best friend's name. And it's almost this like irrational sense that she has, where it's like, she has everybody telling her it's like I doubt the police really think he had anything to do with it. He grew up in this town. Everybody knows Jasper. Of course he's not a killer, but there's just this like deep sense of dread and panic that she's like, I cannot let anything happen to my friend.
Sure.
And that's kind of that's the reason that pulls her into the mystery this time around. Because it's like when you get to book 2, it's like, yes, they have a mystery under their belt, so that it's a lot easier for them to like kind of insert themselves into the scene. But you still need that like gripping, compelling reason for it's like, well, why would I want to get involved after how last time turned out? And so that part's been really fun to explore. But the only downside is that, Jasper kind of has to take time away from, he's like, I got to hole up and wait out this storm. So I have this like, oh, I need to like bring him out and because I miss him and I miss his interactions with Coco. So that's what I'm working on kind of as I'm going through revisions and such, like making sure that like his presence is there as much as I want it to be there.
Yeah. That sounds great. I think your Jasper and my Ray Acavito would get along very well because they're
especially where it's like this, they have, I wouldn't say that, at least for Coco and Jasper, like they don't really have like a flirtiness about them, but they definitely are like they're there for each other. Jasper calls Coco and her boyfriend mom and dad because he's like, I'm your kid that's always tagging along whenever the three of us go out. Like I'm a definition of a third wheel. So he definitely is like a fixture in Coco's life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we all have those anchor points in our lives, and that's we're always pulling from that, because we always invest from ourselves. We have to put all that in your story in some way, shape, or form, whether it's character or plot, people, so yeah.
You have to be, I don't know about you, but I have to be like super, super careful when it comes to like even using names of people that I know, because I get like phone calls that are like, Sarah, you put me as this person. And it's like, what do you like? How on earth do you think that this person is you? Like, yes,
right.
You do happen to share a name, but like I get in trouble a lot when I'm creating characters. That's another part of my character creation process. It cannot be a name of somebody that I know, because I've gotten in way too much hot water with family members. Oh my gosh. And it's funny because at least for my family, they're like, oh, well, you are your main character. And I'm like, that it could not be further from the truth. Like,
yes, right.
Maybe it's somebody that I aspire to be, or I wish that I had been, or, parts of me are a part of that character just because I write what I know. And yes, I know things that these characters know about, but it's like, these characters are not me. And the fact that once they're like, well, Sarah's the main character, and so her aunt must be me, or her dad must be me, and it's just all of this.
Mm-hmm.
It can get really exhausting. So
yes, it's funny, and it's kind of sweet in a way.
It is
that you're reading into this. Yeah, they're reading into it, and I had the same very similar thing with my Vermilion group, because it was set in that town. A lot of the readers were asking if certain characters were real people or not. Like, oh, they were reading into like, oh, I think this is so and so, and this has to be you or this, and I just. There's only one character, the grandma, Mabel Bennett, is based on my grandma. Her last name or maiden name was Bennett, and the relationship that Abby has with her is very similar to the one I used to have with my grandma. And so it was very bittersweet right now. She passed like 8 or 9 years ago, and so it was a way to kind of honor her in a way, but it was very sweet. And as I wrote those scenes, there were times where I was laughing because I'm using a lot of her mannerisms and her stories, and there are times I felt myself just sobbing because I missed her so much, and we had a lovely relationship. I felt very fortunate to have a grandma when I was like 45. It's just like, I don't know too many of the people my age having a grandma who's 90, and we just lived life, loved watching horror films. We just shared all these wonderful moments. So that was my way of kind of honoring her. But other than that, everyone else is like cut from complete fiction, and except for some of the memories that Abby has, as I'd mentioned. But I just love that people invest into it, and they're seeing people they know into these characters, and that's just that's a wonderful feeling.
In in the new series that I'm writing, which is about a book blogger, she has a twin brother who is a movie star. And so she has like this kind of little chip on her shoulder about like her parents supporting all of her brother's dreams and whatnot. And she kind of, fades into the background, which she isn't necessarily like too torn up about because she's a quiet, reserved person. She's like, I don't want to be in the spotlight, but I do want to be recognized for what I contribute to our family. And so as I was writing this, I was like, I need to make sure that my parents know that this is in no way, shape, or form a reflection of how I feel about our relationship, because it's just like people, when you're a writer, people are always like, of course you're writing from experience, but you're also creating a whole ton of stuff that's like completely fiction. And so just making sure, like, I always have to like send a disclaimer when I have a book coming out that's like, you are not reflected
Right.
in this piece. Like, this is a
Yes.
work of fiction.
Yes.
And it's really funny. And luckily my parents, they've been so supportive of my dreams and my career ever since I was a little kid. And they're like, we know, we get it. It's my
Yeah.
other relatives that I have to be worried about.
That's great. Yeah, because on my dad's side, my aunt and my dad both, and my mom read the first book, and my dad had the same reaction as I did. Like sometimes he was laughing, sometimes he was crying because it was so close
Mhm.
to his mom, the character, and that made me feel good. The fact that
That's lovely.
I wrote it really closely.
Mhm.
And the way she would talk to me, I just envisioned her being there, and it was
Mhm.
those moments. But no, I love that. That's great. You still have to put the caveat: these are all fiction,
Oh yeah.
but
I can actually like literally, at the beginning of a book where it's like, all things are like pure coincidence and from the author's imagination.
right,
And it's like,
it doesn't stop
gotta,
people.
yeah, it doesn't stop people. It's like, I just got to highlight this once again. It's like, oh
Yeah,
man,
yeah. But that's great though. I mean, it shows you that they care, and
it
that
does. Yeah.
they're
And I am
really
touched that
invested.
they're reading it because
Yeah,
I've written a lot of books. So the fact that like people are still reading them and like taking the time out of their lives to like, oh, Sarah's got another book that we haven't ordered and all of this stuff. So that's always appreciated.
yeah. Well, that's great. Well, let's talk about your creative process then. And you are very prolific. So when it comes to plot, how are you? How does your plotting for a story come about? Your creative process for coming up with the story for a new book.
I think it's probably the reason why I write mysteries successfully, because I would love to publish all of the half-written, thriller manuscripts that I've tried to write, the fantasy trilogy that I've tried to write. Like, I I just like cannot get to the end because for me in a mystery, the thing that like is the easiest thing about it is like you have your story right at the beginning once you have your mystery, because you have who's dead, why they were killed, who killed them, and how they were killed. And that is a story in itself. So once you have that little building block, you really just have to like, take a step back and see like, okay, well, how do I create a whole world around it? And so every single book that I have ever finished, I have started with just a little block of, hey, this is the person. It doesn't even involve my main character. It's like, this is who's dead. This is who wanted them dead. This is how it happened. And then from there, that's where everything else grows. And how I go about now, I have a pretty tight writing process for when I'm developing a book. When I was first, exploring this avenue and exploring the mystery genre, I would sit down on my computer and I would just be like, okay, like, let's see what happens. And that was hard. Like, it was very, very tough. So then I would begin, just being like, okay, well, this is where my main character is on day 1. By day 3, she's figured this out. By day 5, she's unmasked her killer. And so what I found that was most helpful for me is that I actually have like a week or however long the mystery and the information in the book takes place. And I just map out day by day what's
Okay.
going on, who the main character encounters, what pivotal information needs to be disclosed during this day to help propel the story forward. And so that by the time I get to the end of this outline, it's not so much written in a like, here's a synopsis type of way. It's written, here's what happens Monday. Here's what happens Tuesday. Here's what, maybe we skip a couple days because we're trying to stretch time out. And so things resume on Saturday. And I use that as my guide as I am writing. I don't do chapter by chapter things because I literally can have one day take 3 chapters. If I'm getting into the details enough. And of course, as I'm writing, things are popping up that's like, oh, I didn't even think about this. Like I need to explore it. And so I'm going back to my outline and being like, well, something that happened on Wednesday now is happening on Thursday. And making sure that I'm keeping my outline reflective of what the manuscript is. Because otherwise, if I'm referencing it, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm totally lost.
Mhm.
And that since I've begun doing that day by day process, the experience of writing has become so much more smooth. Like I participated in National Novel Writing Month back in November, where, you know, day one, you know, start writing a book and finish it by the end of the month. And using that guide, I was able to write an entire book in less than a month because I was like, I want to have this done by Thanksgiving. Because
Yeah.
but like having this guide and that focus at the time, because it's like, that's solely what I was doing. It's like, I'm shutting down for November. All I'm doing is working on this book. That day by day strategy has just completely changed how I approach a book.
I'll have
And
to see that strategy. I'll have to look at it.
every
Yeah.
like it like every plot that I have created using this day by day point is I've been able to finish the book.
Oh,
And that's what I'm just like, at this point, it's like, I need to finish things and I need to get things out. And so when I have those ideas, you know, I usually kind of take time away from a project once I finish it. Like I'm not going to go immediately write book 2 after finishing book 1. I like to skip around so that by the time I come back to to a different series, it's fresh. I feel like I'm like revisiting folks for you know, it's a reunion of sorts.
sure.
And so having those day by day synopsis already planned out ahead of time, it's been so helpful.
Oh, that's great. I'll have to, is that 30-day guide, is that available on their website or something?
Oh, I'm not
If
sure
not, I'll just see if you can send one to me.
yeah, well,
I'd be curious to look at it.
the day by day thing is something that I've been doing myself. It's
the national writing, but
yeah,
you said there's a
I
30-day.
can send you a link
Yeah, I love
for
that.
that because that is another we were talking about community and you know how it can, you know, really help you when you're struggling, you know, even on your like isolation of writing a manuscript. Reaching out to a community is always helpful.
Hmm.
And I found that like that the way that it's cultivated, the National Novel Writing Month, is, you know, there are all these writing groups that are springing up. I'm a part of Sisters in Crime, and they were doing a like daily check-in where it's like, hey, how are you doing? And seeing other people's progress, seeing their struggles, seeing like where we were aligning. It was such a great way to fuel me personally. And I got really super competitive with myself because I was like, today I wrote, you know, 1,600 words. Tomorrow I've got to write more. And it was just like this continual push to do better than the day that I did
Sure.
beforehand. And
And the
so it
more
was
you
really,
do, the more reliable sometimes you can be. I mean, it's not always, you still have those
oh,
fluctuations.
for
You know, some
sure.
days you
Well,
only
I
write
was
500 and some days you write 4,000, you know?
Yeah. And I think it was funny by the end, I was like, when it was maybe like 2 weeks into the project, I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm writing so much, I'm getting so much done. Like, why do I not do this every single month? And then I got to the end of the month and I was like, I need just take a break
This
because
is
my
why I don't do it
brain,
every month, right?
yeah.
Yes, get
So
that time
now
away.
with that being over, like I do try, I try really hard to hold myself accountable by setting monthly goals where it's like I want to have this many words in a manuscript. And I know there are a lot of people out there that have a problem with words and like, oh, like, trying to get this many words down. But just for me, it's like it's I'm a very goal oriented person, and meeting a word count is something that I can track and that I can do.
Mhm.
I'm not going to meet it every month. I've definitely not met it every month. But it's just something to like help me track my own progress. I'm
Yeah,
trying to write a 70,000 word manuscript. If I know that I'm 20,000 words into it, I have like a good sense of understanding of like, okay, where I need to go and how I need to keep moving forward.
sure. Well, I mean, also depending on the genre, those genres themselves will have kind of word limitations.
Yes.
Whereas the cozy, eh, my first one, I was like 100 and I don't know, 100,000, so close to 100,000 words.
Mhm.
But the next one is this, it was a pulp, so I'm 45,000.
Mhm.
And so I try to work on whatever genre I'm working on. That's where I want to hit, and I did my book in 30 days. My last book, I knew I wanted to write it in 30 days, and that's what I worked towards,
Mhm.
doing, just because I wanted to set that goal. Like, can I do it? I want to write a book in a month. But I just need to get it done. But that you're structuring your books, stories, plots within days. It's precisely how I'm doing my cozy. And each book takes like a place over a week. So my first book is like Twas the week after Christmas. So it starts on with that day after Christmas and it carries through the whole story. It takes place in a week. And I kind of like that format in a way because it's condensed. You have a lot to
Yeah.
get done, but you have a structure. And now it's like, okay, a lot happens in this week. And so I decided to kind of just keep that. And it does force you to say, okay, I've got a lot to take care of. Where am I
Yeah.
going to put it? And so I
That's
I appreciate that in your writing that you approach the same way.
I love, I guess, and when I'm reading cozy mysteries, this was something that I became very aware of for my own writing, that I was like, man, I cram a lot into a short period of time. And I know that like there are some mysteries that I've read that it takes months, like the heroine is, doing her sleuthing over a course of a month or several weeks. I'm like, wow, like how does that stretch of time, like I can't fathom a amateur investigation, like the person who's the amateur detective having that attention span for that long
Yeah.
period of time. And so there are some of my books that the mystery and the action takes place over the course of like 12 hours. And you've got a 80,000 word book that is literally chronicling in 12 hours of time. And but I find that like that pacing just works for me. And because our mysteries are set up in a way for an amateur sleuth to solve them, that it's really easy to, day one you find this out, day two you find this out, day three you find this out, day four, oh, you've got your killer. And so I like to have that concise action, because otherwise I myself just get lost, like what was happening 2 weeks ago, like what.
Yes.
um, and it's harder for me to keep track, so it's like I like to keep my timelines condensed so that I can, it's just easier to move forward.
Right. Unless you're writing something in the scope of like Frank Herbert and Dune, and time is relative
Oh.
in any one of the books. Like this book, we don't know how many days
Mhm.
pass between when the Atreides land and when Leto's leading the worms. Um, it could be months, years. There's not
Mhm.
that sense of time, and then you have these giant spans of time between books. Oh, it's been 5,000 years since. It's like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
You just gotta come to
I find
accept
it's
it. Yeah.
like I have mine are all set like relatively one after the other, at least for my Court of Mystery series. Like that's very much I'm telling a story from book one all the way through to the end. So there aren't these big gaps of time, like maybe like a couple weeks for allowing people to travel across the continent on horseback and all of this
Yeah.
stuff. But I find that's like, well, my heroines, like, they can't go too long without getting involved. So everything kind of picks up like a couple months after book one, so that they still have that like bug from their work in the first book.
Yeah. Well, that's good because from a reader's standpoint, the story just continues.
Yes.
It is a different story, etc. But you have this sense of continuation,
Mhm.
and that's in itself is kind of comforting. We talked about that earlier. This genre provides comfort, and when you have a continuation of a story, you have a sense like, okay, the characters are going to be okay, or the story is, and you get pulled into something which feels very not only episodic, but this ongoing saga. It becomes epic to
Yeah.
have this, mega series, and to feel a part of this ongoing story because
Mhm.
you're not taking huge breaks. You are just like on a giant sprawling story, like you're walking the ring to Mordor, kind of thing. But
They did that
being
in three
told,
books.
yeah, exactly, right. um yeah, just throw in some songs and it's all, say that's what you need, just throw in some songs and a ring and
Mhm.
you're good to go. So when you write, do you use any like software like Scrivener or Babisco or anything like that?
Somebody asked me the other day, and I was like, I've never heard. I use Microsoft Word is my go-to.
Yeah.
I have all of my like templates because I do independent publishing and I do traditional publishing. So I have to be the publisher for one series, but then I can just be like, okay, here, take my manuscript and format it yourself, for my others. And so I use Word, for the most part. I do use a lot of different software for, I use OneNote for my daily planner where I go through like day one, day two, day three.
Hmm.
Um, I have a lot of notebooks that I use for just free writing. In where I use most of my software comes in for book marketing, and design for the images that I post, promoting my books. And I'm a huge fan of Canva. Like I
Yes.
would not be where I am today without Canva. Like it literally changed my whole book marketing game. And all the content that I create is either using Canva or BookBrush. BookBrush is another like really great, and where BookBrush is smaller and more focused on authors. There's a great community around that platform as well. And yeah, as far as techie as I am, I actually don't use a whole lot when it comes to like software for like outlining, or people are doing like all these crazy Venn diagrams on
Yeah.
on their computer, and I'm like, oh my gosh,
Yeah,
I
it's a lot of
couldn't even
work.
think of that.
Yeah.
So I do a lot of writing in like little paragraphs and saving it to the cloud,
Okay.
and letting that be my guide.
Have all your folders with your characters and your plots and all the information, right?
I do have, this was actually something that my agent had sent out when I first signed with her, but she sent me this grid that was, the character name, what their occupation is, what their point is for the story, like what is their purpose for being in your story, and then a physical description. And it's like that becomes so useful to go back to, especially when you're writing book two or book three in a series, because if you're like, oh, I have a character has this name and I know that I know what they look like, but let me just double check with this reference. And it's this really nice, like long document that I can just easily search for and get like all the information that I need about a character in a
Hmm.
snapshot.
That's great. I when I've been drafting, I have three documents open on my screen at one time. On the middle is
Mhm.
my document, my draft. On my left-hand side is my outline, which is usually colored coded. And then I have multiple documents open. I can open up like, here's my character list, and here are the tensions, and here are this. And on my right side, right of the screen, I have my first of the series up. So I'm remembering, okay, how did this person look or talk?
Yeah.
And I could look really quickly, like, what did I say about this? Because, after you've written it and let it sit for a while, you're moving on to something else,
Mhm.
and especially in this town where you're trying to make characters continue over a longer story, like what you're doing, you have to maintain a character's looks and dress and mannerisms.
Yeah.
So you have to familiarize yourself, again, so people aren't the readers who are going to be paying attention,
Mhm.
um, are going to be noticing, why didn't you do this? So
Yeah.
yeah, that's something, and it's funny. Well, this will dovetail into this question. Have you? I'm not sure how often. I mean, when you're writing your book, you have to really read it a lot, and then when it's gone, you just kind of let it go.
Mhm.
But do you remember like the first time, or if there was multiple times, where you came back to a book like a year or two after you published it and reread it again? Have you ever had that
Oh
experience?
yeah. I mean, so I was actually forced to do it when we started bringing my books to audiobook, because you are listening to your producer and your narrator going through your work, and you're just like, oh, okay. And you're listening and you're like, you're making sure that things are pronounced the way that they should be pronounced. You're listening for quality management, or quality assurance. So it's like, oh, this sentence was misspoken, or something along those lines. And I like, it's for me, I absolutely love it, because not only do I get to revisit and see how far my characters have come, um, but it's also like there's so many things that I have forgotten. I mean, at this point, I've written like 14 stories featuring Duchess Jacqueline, and there are so many things that I have forgotten, or that I'm like, whoops, I like definitely made a mistake in regards to like timeline, or
Mhm.
referencing something that's like, actually that wasn't what was being referenced, it was this person saying this and all of this stuff. um and so it's really humbling to see like, well, I guess I like definitely need to go back and reread these more often, because there are inconsistencies, and that I have been able to, because I was going through this process. You release new editions and all of that great stuff, and they make it so easy these days, where it's like you just
Yeah,
upload a new file and woohoo,
sure.
you've got a new
Ta-da!
document.
Right.
I never made a mistake. What are you talking about?
Yeah, see,
Um,
if you start feeling like Winston Smith in 1984, from
yeah.
Ministry of Truth. Yeah, no, no, this character always had blonde hair. What are you talking about? Right,
Exactly. And
exactly.
so being able to go back and reread is really helpful. And actually, um, I for my new series, the Trending Topic Mysteries, we've been working on getting the proofs ready, getting it ready for publication. And I'd actually already written book two like a long time ago. And so going back and being so like heavily invested in book one right now, it's putting so many things into perspective, so that when I'm going through and making notations, like, oh, like I really need to make sure that I hammer this home in book two, because I don't think I did that the first time around during my first past draft. And so I felt like rereading is so helpful. And if you have the time to do it, especially for series writing, like I cannot recommend it enough, because you will find so many things that like, oh, I forgot that I set that up, or I forgot that I put that little Easter egg in here, and I need to eventually like circle back to it. And so the fact that like this was all done through like with audiobooks, was even more helpful for me, because it's just like a different medium. So I'm not staring at my page and my eyes aren't going crossed. So the presentation method really helped. So I would say for any writers who do have that opportunity to to have an audiobook created, like really pay attention to those words, and see how far your current work has come.
Yeah, and your fiction style, your writing style should
Oh
change. I
yeah,
mean,
for sure.
having come back to this cozy, this was, my fifth book, second in the series. I felt so much more confident with my
Mhm.
prose and just writing. I mean, I've written for years, but never the long fiction. And since I'd written in several different genres, everything was a new experience. But coming back to this world, immediately there was a sense of a little. hesitancy and trepidation, like, can I make it as good as the first one, or is it going to feel right?
Mhm.
Because when I read this, I had to read the book again to remember what I wrote, you know,
Yep.
because it had been a couple of years, and I'm like, I could never have written that book now because I'm a different writer than I was several years ago. I'm in a different
Oh, for sure.
headspace, you
Yeah.
know, and I was reading, I'm like, oh, this, because Stephen King had suggested that. I'm not to harp on his stuff, but I'm like, he said it's a really surreal experience, and I'm like, yeah. And there were parts where like, wow, this isn't bad. I was waiting for the cringy moments that they didn't really come,
Mhm.
and I was like, oh, okay. But I was also thinking, I can't write this again. I mean, to this exact book, I would never be able to do it again. But it enabled me to have the sense of confidence going into the next one, that I stepped into the world. It felt very familiar. The characters felt very, very familiar, like putting
Mhm.
on an old flannel shirt. Like, okay, I kind of get that.
Yeah.
But but it is very surreal. So, like the first time you hold your book in your hand, your print book,
Mhm.
can you tell us, like, how did that feel for you? The very first
Um,
one.
very first one. It was very like, it was almost bittersweet because it's like this book is what it is, and it's going out into the world. People are going to either hate it, they're going to like it, or maybe they'll love it. And so it was very terrifying at the same time, but just to see like all of the work and time and dedication that went into just this little piece. It was such a moment of pride, um, that was tinged with like, oh man, this has the chance of going really poorly.
Yeah, people could be
Um,
cruel, right?
People can be so cruel.
Yes.
Um, yeah, it's weird because we put so much of ourselves into these books, and we're writing them. I'm right. I know that there are a lot of people. It's like, I'm writing this book for me and me alone. It's like, I'm writing this book to entertain people.
Mhm.
I'm not going to ever claim that like I'm here to write the next great American novel that's going to be talked about for centuries. Like, I'm here to entertain people, and I
Mhm.
want people to finish these books and be like, I enjoyed my time with this character. And so when you know right off the bat that like that's not going to be the case for some people, most people, who knows, it's so scary and
Mhm.
terrifying. And I think for the type of personality that I have, I always tend to stress and have anxiety over things. So I don't think I appreciate as much of what I've accomplished, and the magnitude of how amazing it is to write a book and get it published, either self-publishing or through a traditional publisher.
Mhm.
um
You think
I
of
don't think.
yourself differently once you become a writer in that way. You
Mhm.
got proof that you've written something.
Yeah.
You begin to kind of defining yourself in a new way,
Mhm.
right? I mean,
It's
and
it's it's such a like a mark of like, I sat down and I did this. I do believe that everybody is capable of writing a book. Um, I I think everybody has a story to tell. And but the fact, like, do you have the drive? Do you have the focus? Do you have the desire to do this? Like, those are all things that that kind of set a writer apart from anybody else. You have a lot of people that when they are commenting on your work, it's like, I could have written this. And
I
it's
said,
like,
good,
okay,
do it, write
well,
that book, fly that flag,
yeah.
and
And
see
and
who
so I
salutes
think
it.
I think that like a lot of that gets lost in once you've been published, because you've done it,
Yeah.
and you've realized that it wasn't an insurmountable hurdle, or it wasn't like it was something that you could do, and you accomplished it, and you did it, and it's done. And so it becomes less scary. It becomes less like, oh my God, like, how did I ever do that? It's something that you've achieved, and it's something to be extremely, extremely proud of. Um, but I think that for me personally, a lot of my the feelings that I have, like, it's always like, okay, what comes next, or what's going to
Mhm.
come next, what comes after. So I think that like there's always this sense of fear and like trepidation mixed into I'm super, super proud of what I've accomplished.
It makes perfect sense. I think because we invest so much of ourselves into
Mhm.
our writing, rejection feels very personal.
Yeah.
And because it is really easy for people to criticize. And now we live in a really judgy
Yes.
society with, social media. Everyone's a critic, and but I think it's really good that we've talked about our very supportive group on Instagram,
Mhm.
and no matter the genre, it may be things that we might not be interested in as readers, but I still applaud everyone who's writing, who's written, who publishes. And when
Mhm.
I saw like the sheer volume of books that you've been writing, I was like, holy crap, just an amazing amount of books. So extra kudos to
Thank
you
you.
for this ongoing series, and so that's just brilliant that you can do that and keep on cranking out, these books, and that people like them and buy them, and that you're having fun,
Yes.
as
I
well.
think that I think once it stops becoming fun, that's when it's like you have to kind of examine like, okay, well, where's the joy gone?
Mhm.
And to comment on what you said about rejection feeling personal, I will like at the beginning when I first started this, it was crushing. Like looking at reviews was crushing. Um, and it's like, oh man, like maybe I'm just a really horrible writer. And like,
Right.
and I've just like been deluding myself into thinking. But then, you come across a review that's like, this is my favorite series, or,
Hmm.
this, like, I cannot get enough of these characters. And those comments are just like, they make all of the rejection and all of the negativity just float away.
Yeah,
And
and you're surprised. I mean, I get it. I mean, I've had people, like when I read reviews on Amazon from people I don't know.
Mhm.
There's a woman, the first time I sold a book in Europe, this woman from France bought my book. I'm like, how are you finding my book? And
Good
she let
marketing.
this, yeah, well, she let this really wonderful review. And I'm like,
Mhm.
you know, it was just so pleasing. So wonderful. I get that. It does, like, and then I welcomed my first 1-star review, and there was no response. It wasn't to this book, it was another book. It was just 1 star on Goodreads, and no comments at all. I'm like, I don't care if you hated it, just tell me why.
Yeah.
And I understand that people aren't going to like everything, and like you, unlike you, I'm not writing to please. I am writing to please myself first and foremost. I want readers to like what I write, and that's
Mhm.
that's wonderful. But at the end of the day, if I'm trying to tell the story that I think is good for me,
Mhm.
and I hope it resonates with others. But I was so proud of that 1-star review in a way, because it was like, I'm like, what the hell, what did I do? But at least give me the words that tells
Mhm.
me what you didn't like about it. But then I realized this is just pretty common. If someone gives it 1 star without saying anything, that I don't really hold a lot of weight with that.
Yeah.
But another book, my third one, which is a nonfiction book, I I got a 3-star review, and the person loved the book, but said at the end it was 3 stars because of too many f-bombs, and I just started laughing. Like, that's fantastic. I love that. Thank you. I'm happy with that review. Because
Mhm.
if you liked the book
Review
but just didn't like the fact that
reviews
I said fuck, it's like, okay, that's it. All right.
reviews are like, I the writing our writing group that I'm a part of, they're like, don't read them. Just don't read them. And I'm
Mhm.
like, but I can't help but read them. And at least I have, like, I don't know if it's because I have had enough bad reviews and I'm still here and I'm still kicking and all of this stuff. And it's like, okay, it is what it is. You cannot please everybody.
Right.
And a lot of the times it's like when you read them, you're like, I'm just grateful that somebody took the time to read my book and give their feedback about it. And
Yeah.
I think a lot of uh, I know, at least when you're a new author, and or it's your first book, and it's like, and you start seeing like, 2-star reviews, 3-star reviews. And it's like, oh man, like these are awful, but you read them and they're actually good reviews. And it's just like this, I always like to think that it's like, I think the 5-star review system is really, really tricky to navigate, because if you look at how it's actually presented, a 3-star book is a good book.
Mhm.
But it doesn't feel like that's the
Right,
case.
especially because it's not a 5.
And it's
our
like,
old
let's say we
greatest
go to like 20
60%.
stars and figure out like where on the scale of 20 stars
Right.
we fit.
Or do the Rotten Tomatoes. Give me 1 to 100%.
Yeah.
Right.
So
That's challenging.
It's it's one of my like least favorite aspects of the whole writing thing.
Yeah.
However, like a good review can just like totally make your day. And I'm lucky I'm at the point where it's like a bad review is like, oh, okay, on to the next thing in my life. But a good review is still like, it's so nice. It's such a welcome thing.
Writers have to have thick skin.
Yes.
I got my BFA in creative writing, and I went through a lot of those early writing workshops. And so you learn really quickly to accept criticism and have a thick skin. You don't take it personally. It's hard to not sometimes, but after a while you just get used to it. Like, you realize it's not going to resonate with everybody. And if you did the best job you could, then that's all you can do. So, listen, I don't want to keep you all night. I'd like to just kind of wrap things up a little bit for you. Just like, if you've done so much more than most writers I know, because how many books have you written, published?
Hold on, I gotta count.
I was gonna say, you got 3 series.
As of February, I think I'll have published 16 books.
Okay, that's amazing. So super congrats to that.
Thank you.
That is awesome.
My brain just went like,
yeah, that's phenomenal. So do you have still, is there a writer fantasy left in you? Like, what is your writer fantasy?
Oh, I mean, I have so many. I like have all of these scenarios in my mind. I would love to have every single one of my books made into a TV show, movie. That's like what I would love to see them just
Netflix picks up your series.
I know that there are some people who be like, that's like such a materialistic thing to have. It's like, I want these books to become TV shows. And I think like I would obviously there's so many amazing writing awards out there. I don't even know them all. I would love to, I don't know. I would love for, especially like my Court of Mystery series, which is like kind of its own thing. It has a life of its own in regards to like genre. It would be nice to, somebody to be like, this could be a new type of mystery novel where you're blending like fantasy, like Game of Thrones meets Agatha Christie. Like that's kind of how I like phrase this world. But yeah, I ultimately the TV show thing. I would love to have a TV show.
I like that idea. I like the way you phrased it. Game of Thrones meets Agatha Christie. Who plays the Duchess? Which actress plays the Duchess?
Gosh, in
your fantasy, do you have like, when you were creating her, did she?
Not the Duchess. She is like her own character. I definitely have like other people in mind for supporting characters, but I think that the Duchess would have to be like, she'd have to be like a new person, a new face on the scene.
Right.
I would just love, I don't know. I would love to see a lot of new faces get their start. Like when you talk about, I know this is going to sound like a really silly thing to compare to, but like when you think about like how the Twilight franchise launched the careers of really who became amazing actors. I want that to be like my platform for people. I want to launch the careers of amazing young actors.
That's awesome. Well, Netflix, if you're listening,
Yes.
You better get
Netflix
on this
streaming,
series.
I will go anywhere. I'm not like loyal. Well, I probably shouldn't say that because then they'll be like, well, we definitely don't want her. But I would be happy to be on any streaming platform at this point, especially after seeing like what everybody has done with like so many great adaptations.
Yeah.
It would be super cool.
And they're the ones who are taking those chances and are doing things outside of the Hollywood system and getting things done.
Mhm.
And that's making Hollywood, finally look bad because they've never had competition before.
Mhm.
Like, oh, we don't need to work hard. No, Netflix is kicking their butt. Hulu, they're doing these great original stuff. So I would love to see that for you. That would be
Thank you.
awesome. So last thing, can you tell us where we can find all 16 of your books?
All
Where are they?
16 of my books are available on Amazon.com. My upcoming book, hashtag Follow Me for Murder, is actually going to be available wherever books are sold. I'm really excited about that. But everybody can always find me at www.saraheburr.com. And that will give you access to everything that I currently have in production.
It's a really nice website, easy to navigate. It's very pretty,
That has been a labor of love. I honestly have put more effort and energy into my website in the past year than I probably have into some of my books.
It shows.
It's those are tricky. Those are really hard
Yes.
to like figure out like how the heck, especially like once you begin writing so many different series, like how do I make this all cohesive? And how do I tie a social media influencer with a duchess from a fantasy world? Like how do you make that work?
Mm-hmm.
So it's been something that it was one of my goals last year. It's like I got to get my website like working for me. So I'm extremely happy to hear that that it at least looked good.
Well, it does, and it also explains each of the series
Ooh,
because you see that, and I like the row of books because the books with the true cozy have that kind of cutesy,
yep.
cartoony look, but then here's this court mystery series, and it looks well, these are like paintings, and this is
Yep.
it's
Oh my
lush,
gosh, the covers for
yeah, the
those
covers
books,
are beautiful, yeah.
the cover artist that makes them, I can send him like a little chicken scratch drawing and be like, can you make this into a cover? And he comes back with this gorgeous design. I'm just like, oh my gosh, it's
Yes,
beautiful
cover art is worth its weight in gold.
for sure.
Yes, and like you, I did two of my books in Canva for the some cost of $1, and
Mhm.
two of my other covers were done by friends who gave me their art for free and and said, I want to be part of what you're doing,
That's
and
wonderful.
it is wonderful, and I'm so grateful. And the second book, Gage Black, Hell's Revenge, is painting. My friend Chris Martinez did it, and passed away from cancer the following year. And he said that was like his favorite thing that he had ever done. So
Mhm.
that I get to carry him with
That's
me.
beautiful. That's just a
It is
wonderful
really, yeah,
tribute.
it is. It's special to have that book. And then the my pulp horror was drawn by Marvel and DC Comics legend Mike Gustovich,
Oh,
who
wow.
lives in Parma. Yeah, it's just, and we've just been friends. I'm actually editing one of his books now, and he just said, "Yeah, I'll do your book for free." I'm like, "Ha!" And I told him what I wanted, and like 2 days later, he sent me back the sketch. He's like, "Is this okay?" I'm like, "Holy crap!"
Yeah.
And then another
Yeah.
friend did the coloring, and I'm like, I'm just so blessed
That,
that these people could have charged me $1,000 to do that cover.
mhm.
So I get it. It's amazing, and I so appreciate these artistic friends who are willing to give me their time and to put something beautiful together.
Mhm.
So um, Sarah, it has really been lovely to talk with you and get to know you, and I really appreciate you spending some time with me tonight.
This has been so wonderful. And like, again, like the sense of community, like it's so nice talking with other writers. Like there's just something that like you get and it's such a great outlet. And so I really appreciate you reaching out to begin with and for wonderful, really like great, insightful questions that
Oh,
didn't
thank
leave
you.
me like, oh my gosh, like how do I even begin to respond to this? Like, no, they were just like so instinctual and like very this was wonderful. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that. Your reader feedback. Thank you very much. So, all right. So, hey, you've been watching and listening to Between the Lines. You can watch us on our YouTube page, which is, if you're watching, that's where you're at. You can listen to us on unsaneradio.com. You can download full episodes or listen on your device. If you're a writer and would like to talk join me for a chat, email me at betweenthelines54@yahoo.com, betweenthelines54@yahoo.com. And here's my cheesy outro, Sarah. See you next time, Between the Lines. Thank you. This has been a wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. I had a really wonderful time.
Good.
And thank you so much. I'm so glad that we got to connect, and please stay in touch. I can't wait to see your next book.